Okay, our next speaker is Thomas Franke. He is a full professor of engineering, psychology, and cognitive ergonomics at the University of Lübeck, and he is particularly interested in user diversity and a resource perspective on user technology interaction.
And welcome to this next talk, where I want to present a new scale to assess affinity to technology that we developed. We as Christiane Attich, a researcher from Chemnitz University of Technology, and Daniel Wessel, a researcher from Lübeck. Yeah, let's start. So, if you think about modern life, I think one key thing is that daily life is increasingly pervaded with digital technology. So successful coping with technology is an important factor for daily life. And one key question is, why do some people cope well with technology and others do not? If you think about it, of course, the first factor is knowledge, skills, of course, for interacting with specific systems. So the more knowledge and skills you have, the easier it is to cope with a new system. However, there's a second factor, which is personality. So you could say something like a general interaction style. So for all of you who were born as traffic psychologists, as I was, it's like driving skills and driving style. And we want to focus on the second dimension, or second factor, personality. And one core dimension is the way that people approach technology, technical systems. You could also say the user's affinity to technology interaction. So do users either actively approach new systems and explore them, or do they rather try to avoid or tend to avoid interaction with new systems in new ways? So we would say that ATI, affinity to technology, is a key personal resource for a successful technology interaction. And now, if we start with this, then first of all, there are two perspectives on ATI. First is an attitudinal perspective. So you could say there's one perspective that says people can be more or less interested in new systems. So in terms of purchase interests, more like consumer facets, consumer psychology. Or you could go for a behavioral perspective and say, affinity to technology, that's something like an interaction style or perhaps cognitive style. And I would go for the second, and I hope this will be clear within the talk. Now, if you look into the literature, what's there in terms of existing scales, so we have recently published a small review about scales, personality scales, and technology interaction, starting from the 80s, where scales were about computer anxiety, to recent scales which are more about things like nomophobia, so no mobile phobia. And the two scales that are most closely related to what we are looking for are the first, TAEG. That's a scale that has 19 items, 4 dimensions, and focus on affinity to technology on an attitudinal level. So rather purchase interests, general perception of technology implications, and things like that. Second, there's the geeks, which is a question that tries to assess geekism as a unidimensional construct with 15 items. However, while it is seen as a continuum, it's rather focused more, or it's rooted in these computer entities. So you could say on the ATI trait, it rather differentiates in the higher ranges. So what is the ideal scale? So what would be the ideal scale that we are looking for? The ideal scale would be unidimensional because easier to use. Normally you just want to have it as an extra variable in your experimental or correlational setting. It should be short and reliable. It should discriminate between people over the whole range of the ATI trait. And it should be interaction focused, not so much attitudinal focused. And last but not least, it should be grounded in an established psychological construct. And now it's your turn to guess which psychological construct we decided for. Or I do it, need for cognition. So perhaps who knows the concept need for cognition? Okay, quite a lot, quite great. For all other people, so need for cognition is a concept that dates back until the 1950s and was made popular by Cacioppo and Petty in the framework of the elaboration likelihood model in the 1980s. And since then, there's a huge amount of research that assesses or examines this concept in all different domains. And so our rationale was, first of all, individuals differ regarding the tendency to engage in cognitive activities, so that's need for cognition. And if we continue this line of thinking, then when people actively explore a new technical system, this also needs kind of cognitive engagement. So we said, affinity technology could be something as a domain-specific form of need for cognition. And we are not alone with this rationale, and there's some empirical support. So first of all, one can say that domain-specific variants of general personality scales or traits have been proven useful also in the field of technology interaction. And first, research supports the relevance of need for cognition for technology interaction. So for example, the Geeks questionnaire explicitly makes this connection between need for cognition and technology interaction. So what was our scale mission? We wanted to assess users' affinity for actively interacting with technical systems, and we wanted to formulate it as an interaction style in alignment with need for cognition and as a personal resource. So this is our specific perspective for successful technology interaction, which means facets such as the affinity to engage in technical systems in detail and devote time, the affinity to explore or use available functions, or the affinity to trying to understand technical systems. And we developed this scale over the last 6 months, more or less. So we started developing the items in March, and then we collected data in total up to now around 1,400 participants. So we did a test of the German scale, then we did a translation of the scale to have an English version of the scale with 2 native bilingual speakers, so blind translation, back translation process, and so on. And then we did some further tests, and yeah, that's the scale. So now we can decide if I either read out all the items or if we go to the results, and I would say let's go to the results. Or we can come back to the wordings later. So as I said, there's quite a database up to now, and there are some further studies who already use the scale, the other researchers, and I will focus on 3 more important studies. First of all, our first construct validity study. Sample is not very optimal. You see that we really did convenience sampling, opportunity sampling with students. The Chrome-Bus alpha is good. That's perfect, perhaps something that's also interesting for all the studies. So on the right column, you can see the Chrome-Bus alpha's values. They are all good to excellent with 9 items. And this is also good in this first study. And what's interesting here is correlations. So first of all, there are quite high correlations with the GECS and or Geeks and the TAEG, so the other affinity to technology related scales. There's a moderate correlation, could be a bit higher to need for cognition. There's almost no correlation or very small correlations to big 5. So we seem to measure something more than just big 5 dimensions. Then 4, there's a relationship to relevant outcome variables. However, it has to be said, it's just self-report up to now. And you can also show nice effects like comparing psychology students to computer science students and see there's a good, so the scale can discriminate between these 2 populations. Okay, next study, US sample, we used Amazon Mechanical Turk. I can go into details in case of any criticisms of this approach. We had a bit better sample, better age variation, better gender distribution, quite nice Chrome-Bus alpha, and also correlations. Only the Geeks is available in English, so we use this. Quite a high correlation. Also here the need for cognition correlation is higher. Again, nicely, no relationship to, or only small ones to big 5. And relevant outcomes also show relationships as in the first study. And then we have a last study, which is our marketplace study. So what we did is we went, or our students' assistants went to 7 different cities in Germany and they went to public places and they randomly approached people, and then we introduced a quota plan to have a better representation of the German population. And this is still in the process, so if you are really looking precisely, you can see that our gender distribution is not perfect right now, but we are working on this. But we have a wide age distribution, so between 16 and 88 years old. We have a quite nice Chromebox alpha. What I like the most about this is that our population mean, so the scale mean in the population is 3.5, and we have a 6-point response scale, so the scale mean is 3.5. That's nice. I mean, it could also be different, but it gives some kind of indication that the scale might be able to differentiate quite well in the general population. Also, if you see the percentile values below. And again, correlations. This was just a one-pager, so not so much other variables could be assessed. However, we find relevant correlations to outcome variables, and there are also some nice further effects, just in case you're interested. So there is a population effect in terms of gender, so males are more affin to technology, at least as the questionnaire measures it. There's not such a large effect of age, but there is. So I just made all correlations almost all positive, but it means all the lower score values. And education level has no effect. Okay, so what do we take from these 10 to 15 minutes? First of all, I would say or conclude that the ATI is an economic, reliable, unidimensional scale. I didn't talk about this unidimensionality thing, but factor analyzes tell that it's unidimensional. It shows expected relationships to relevant variables, so need for cognition and ATA-related scales. It's not a direct function of the big 5 personality dimensions, and it can detect group differences, like study programs, age, gender, and stuff. And nice, it shows no floor or ceiling effects so far in our studies, and the population mean is right at the scale center, response scale center. So of course, that's just the first step. So what are our next steps? What do we plan? First of all, of course, we have to do further studies, examine the predictive power of the ATI and predicting behavioral outcomes. We will do that, and if anyone wants to apply the scale and do that, then we are very interested in the results. Second, of course, to make this possible, we want to disseminate the scale and support researchers in implementing the AT scale, so you can get even Lime survey templates if you like to do online questionnaires. And we want to translate the scale to further languages, which is only possible with researchers from other countries who would like to use it. So if you would like to apply the AT scale or know someone who might be interested, then just drop us a line. Thanks for your attention.